Yeah, so I think there's lots of opportunity for us in IoT, both on the enterprise and in the home space. And there's just to wrap us up from our conversation today, I just wanted to ask JD to talk about matter, right? And if you could just explain to us what matter is, and it's not the stuff that makes up the universe. It's something else. So if you could just enlighten us on matter and let us know what's going on there.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that. Again, as I said earlier, I've always kind of been excited about the protocols and kind of watched what's taking place there. And so, of course, the big question now is does matter matter when it comes to IoT? Um, matter is essentially a rebrand of what many of us probably know as chip or the connected home over IP solution, or I guess working group that is there's a stupid number of companies involved: Samsung, Apple, Google, all of the major players. And in many ways, where we're at now with IoT is where we were 20 years ago with Wi-Fi, right? If we think about Wi-Fi, right? Wi-Fi is we think about Wi-Fi, and we often use Wi-Fi and wireless interchangeably. We often use Wi-Fi when we're actually talking about 802.11, right? Those are interchangeable, but Wi-Fi is actually more than that. Wi-Fi is a complete protocol stack. It's 802.11 for Fi and Mac. It's IP for addressing at the network layer. It's TCP, UDP, ICMP. It's all of these things that get layered on. It's encryption and onboarding, authentication. So Wi-Fi is much more than 802.11. Matter is much more than 802.15.4, which is what it's built on, right? So in the case of Matter, what we have is 802.15.4, which describes the Fi and Mac layer. It's 6LoWPAN, which is really an adaptive layer for IPv6. It's how do we take ridiculously large IPv6 packets and cram them down into these tiny little packet sizes that we use in IoT level, but it's ultimately IPv6. And then it is wow, I just went completely blank. And then it's thread, above that, right? And then wrapping around that is onboarding services and security and all of those other things that kind of go along with a complete solution. So when we think about what the Wi-Fi Alliance did, what the Wi-Fi Alliance really did was create a space of interoperability. I would say the Wi-Fi Alliance, in my personal opinion, the Wi-Fi Alliance, the Apple Airport, and then the Intel Centrino solutions, right? Total solutions were kind of the thing that brought what we think of today as Wi-Fi into the mainstream, right? Because those were complete solutions that guaranteed things would work, in a particular manner, and that's what we're now seeing with Matter and kind of what's taking place there. It's so important, in fact, that if you actually right now, if you go out and you look for the Zigbee Alliance, they were also a member of of CHIP initially, and what's now Matter. If you actually go out there, what you'll find is they're not really the Zigbee Alliance anymore. Now they're the Connectivity Standards Alliance, and the Connectivity Standards Alliance is pushing Matter. They also are still supporting Zigbee along with a few other protocols, but really now everything is about Matter and the bits and pieces that come along with it. So we're kind of in this early stage. In fact, right now, while we're recording this, happens to be whenever CES is going on, and so it's definitely worth kind of keeping an eye on what is coming out of CES. Obviously you want to be looking for for Matter, for 802.15.4, for 6LoWPAN, for these kind of lower protocols, but you'll see a lot of people this year begin to talk about Matter. And I think further on, really next year, especially as we kind of get out of this chipset shortage and kind of the issues that are kind of involved around that, you're going to see an explosion of those devices that are Matter devices, and we're going to see this kind of I personally think fairly fast transition from, from a very broad market of protocols that all kind of have different layers, attached to them, to I would be willing to bet within 5 years, 80% of the devices that IoT devices that are sold that are not Wi-Fi will be Matter. There's obviously there's I think there's wireless heart and there's some of those that are going to stick around and going to be more long haul. But I believe Matter is kind of where things are headed. So the great thing about that is if we look at maybe the good news is if we look at the CWICP training, for example, we spend a lot of time in understanding 802.15.4 and understanding 6LoWPAN and understanding Thread. And so if you understand from a wireless perspective those three protocols, you understand a large portion of what's taking place in Matter. And from that point on, it's really just, again, understanding the onboarding and kind of some of those other, the other requirements that come for a secure network. So just wanted to throw that out. I think we will probably, when we come back around to review the CWICP in a few months, we will probably have to at least address it in some manner. But I think in the both near and long term, if you're looking for what IoT protocol to begin exploring, Matter is a great direction to go. One, because it's got the industry support with all of the companies that are involved, and two, because as you understand that, you understand so many of those sub-layer protocols that are going to be really important to us long term.
Yeah, the future is going to change quickly, and I think it's encouraging to see a convergence on one standard instead of disparity of many different protocols. But I wonder sometimes from the consumer's perspective, you mentioned watching CES and looking for if products or new ideas coming out, if they have that Matter certification or the Matter logo. Do you think consumers will care about that, or will they just care about, hey, this is some fancy new toy and it's going to work really well when I try to connect it to my car, or my kitchen, or my toaster, or my coffee machine?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So the standards consumer probably doesn't care, right? It's just another term and technology. But what does matter, what the industry cares about, right, is this whole interoperability. And as we know, there's HomeKit, there's Google Home, there's the Alexa, ecosystem around an Amazon world, and Samsung, their protocol stack, SmartThings, and there's the Hue, made by was Philips, and now it's Signify. So there are all these little bits and pieces that they care because they want to be able to interoperate, right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, Google wants to be able to interoperate with all of your home devices, whether it's one of theirs or not, because they're not going to be able to harvest your data without it. But more seriously, it behooves them to have that interoperability, which is the reason they all became part of Chip, and they're all part of Matter. So I think it's going to be less about. Initially, it's going to be less about, consumers going and choosing Matter. Like for me, I just moved. Everything I'm buying is going to be, capable of Thread, right? So if it's capable of Thread, it's 6LoWPAN and 802.15.4, and most likely will be Matter capable. And so I'm actually getting rid of a lot of stuff that I previously had that was Zigbee or was Z-Wave or was some other protocol. And so I think there are going to be some people who are going to kind of make that decision, but I think the reality is just because the device manufacturers care, we're going to see this fast transition to, if you want a smart home device, it's going to be a Matter device. And then in the maybe near term, and midterm, the customers win because they do have that interoperability. And I think about all of the, part of the things that came along with doing a smart home over the years has been, all of these add-on services so that you can get this device to talk with this other device, or to spur to spur an action, right? Or this internet service to be able to do these things. And even as a technical person, that wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always consistent, and it was sometimes more frustrating than it was worth. And there were definitely times when I took whole systems out and just pretty much threw them in the garbage because it was just like it's no longer worth the frustration. And even as a technical person, I wasn't able to make it work well. So the consumers are going to win because I think a lot of that's going to go away. And then the other thing that we see, when we because this is, I think that's one of the things that came along with kind of rebrand. When it was branded the Connected Home over IP or chip, I think it was over IP, or was it interoperability? Either way, chip. The fact that it had home in it said to everyone, well, this is a home protocol. Well,
yeah,
HomeKit has home in it, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you, there's a lot of enterprises networks that are trying to figure out how to interact, how to bring in HomeKit. The number of enterprise networks out there that are dealing with headaches around Bonjour and MDNS and all of those things that are really built for home networks, right? And they're being kind of forced and brought into the enterprise. So make no mistake about it, this is intended to be a unifying standard across both home and enterprise, and we will, we're all going to benefit from it.
The unifying standard of everything.
I hope.
Can I be a little controversial, JD?
Absolutely.
Yes, please, yes.
Okay, so recently, and what I'm working on at the moment is what's happening, in the CBRS band, right? And so to be a little bit controversial, it's forecasted in the next few years that the industrial IoT space will be much larger than the home market. And there's a lot more money in the industrial space in terms of having more expensive IoT equipment. The home is always going to be fairly inexpensive equipment, but in IoT, there's a lot more money to be spent. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the next few years with the 5G LAN, right? As we bring the 5G technologies and they start to be deployed by the enterprise. And so some of the stuff I'm seeing is an overlay on the Wi-Fi networks in order to put critical traffic on it, quad stuff, high reliability. 5G is still emerging. It still doesn't give you that ultra high reliability that the factory systems need. But, it's just, I just think that world is a really interesting, like the home market. I absolutely 100% agree with what you're saying. It needed Matter, and it really needed to focus. But I think there's a really exciting space when it comes to market share in the industrial space and what's happening with the 5G LANs. Interesting one to watch. Be an interesting podcast in the future. And should be
it's a really good,
part of the certification, by the way. I haven't quite won that argument with Tom yet, but I'm working on it.
It absolutely would be. I will say I'm actually a huge proponent of CBRS, and I'm really excited to see what comes out of that. I believe that it certainly has its strengths, and I could can definitely see that also being one of those large players in that. There was, and if it helps any, I will say that in the CP JTA, we did have a long conversation around whether or not we should be including CBRS. And in fact, the only reason that we left it out wasn't about whether or not it was relevant to the field, but it was more because there's already training around it, and cramming a couple of hours of conversation around CBRS into what is already a kind of a crowded field of 10 other protocols didn't do it justice when there is CPI training and other other training that's out there that ultimately, if someone's going to work in that space, probably needs to take anyways. That's separate. So it wasn't to diss CBRS, to say it doesn't, it's not important. It was more about whether or not we could do it justice, and whether or not there was already solid training out there for it. So I'm completely on board with you. I believe CBRS is going to be the other one, and I agree that would be a great conversation to have on a future episode.
Yeah, and I probably shouldn't say this, but what I'm actually working on, and it won't be part of the IoT certification, but we're actually working on putting some video training up for the Wi-Fi folks to help them understand what is 5G lands, what does it actually do, how does 5G differ from Wi-Fi, what are its strengths and weaknesses, and to help Wi-Fi people really understand how it can integrate, less of an IoT, but more of a LAN thing, but it feeds into the IoT space as well. So probably middle of next year there should be some video training up there, not part of an official cert, but certainly giving the industry something. And hopefully I didn't spill the beans on something. I don't know if there was meant to be a big announcement. I'm sure there isn't, but I might be shot later on.
Thanks for sharing, Avril.
Yeah, I may be totally shot now, but that's what I'm actually working on.
Fantastic.
I think that's awesome. That's something that we need. I had a gentleman in class a while back who just didn't understand Wi-Fi. He just couldn't get his head around it. And he asked me a question. He said, Phil, try and explain to me again. So which channel does the Wi-Fi go on so it can negotiate with the access point, so it can get a channel or a TDM to operate on? I said, hold on. I said, you come from cellular, right? He said, yes. I said, forget everything you know about that. It's the wild west of Wi-Fi. None of that. It's like a fight in a bar. Everybody goes in and they try to do what they can. And he said, it just suddenly clicked into place. Because people don't understand that cellular is a totally different way of doing it. The radio protocols, the RF protocols are similar, but the structure and the concepts are completely different. So I'm very much looking forward to that, Avril. I'll definitely line up for that one, because that's something we can encourage to learn more, because I think 5G is going to be huge, because it's got the ability to be Wi-Fi en masse, right? So Wi-Fi for a country, not just for your house or your enterprise. It's going to allow you to be mobile and connected with fast data rates, if we believe all the promises. And I think that is going to be another changer in the industry. When not only can you walk around your building and be connected, but you can walk around the city or the county or the country and remain connected.
Yeah. The cellular guys will have a lot easier understanding of Wi-Fi if you just talk AX and talk resource units, because they have resource blocks, and then they kind of go, oh, I get it.
Which is where it kind of came from, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're all going in the same way.
Yeah.
I give people an analogy, and I talk about my Grand Caravan has ABS, and I love my Grand Caravan, and it has ABS. Well, 25 years ago, Ferrari invented the concept of ABS for their Formula One car, right? And it cost like $1 million per car. It doesn't cost that anymore. And I tell people that what the cellular guys and gals do today is what we will end up doing in 5 to 10 years. OFDMA is a classic example of that. Because you can spend $1 million on a technology in the cellular space, but you don't want to spend $1 million, or you don't want to pay $1 million to have that technology in your access point.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, in the cellular camp, their standards now are focused on developing something that's cheaper. Can we take out the complexity? Can we make it, bring it down, because we can't penetrate these markets like Wi-Fi can?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was fun days, right?
Absolutely. I think the one thing I've learned is that what I know now will need to be updated in a couple of months or a year or so.
Or next week.
Or next week. That is right. because the one constant we have is change, right? I tell people in class and things that since I left school, I haven't stopped learning. I did a Novell certification a long time ago, and ever since then, I've been doing Microsoft certifications and Cisco certifications and CWNP certifications and CompTIA certifications, and the list goes on. Because to remain relevant, you have to keep your knowledge up.
Yeah.
And that I think is the important thing, that we need to keep up to date on technologies.
Yeah, even on this podcast, I've learned stuff from you guys.
Awesome. That's our goal, Troy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Have everyone learn something. Yeah.
And we have at least 2 more podcasts scheduled, I think, Troy, from the conversations we've had today, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's expanding and spreading. This is good. But on that note, let's bring the podcast to a close here. So just do a quick round table. Ask you guys just for your thoughts, final comments, just on today's show, your thoughts about anything that we talked about. We'll go to let's go to JD first. Let's if your closing thoughts.
I think mostly it's maybe 2 closing thoughts, and that is if we're going to call ourselves wireless engineers, not Wi-Fi engineers, then we have to be able to at least have conversations and one day work in the non-Wi-Fi protocols. So pick one and begin learning it. Again, 15.4, if you understand 802.11, 15.4 is kind of similar. It's pretty easy to kind of begin wrapping your head around. I'll actually tweet it out again today. If you guys want to link it, you're more than welcome to. I have a kind of a cheat sheet of protocols that kind of have some specifics that may help people to kind of wrap their heads around what is consistent across all protocols, right? And so I'll tweet that out today, and you guys can link it if you want. It was something
awesome. Thanks, Judy.
Class, yeah. And then the other thing too is, again, just be willing to have to change your conversation style sometimes, when it's required, and to kind of be aware of who you're talking to and how their conversation style may be a little differently, and how, without changing the message at all, little tweaks in your conversation style may bring out someone and get someone contributing in a new way. And that's going to be better for them, and also if you're someone you're working with, better for you.
Cool. Thanks, JD. Phil, let's go to you. Final thoughts.
I think we've covered a lot today. What great session we've had today, Troy. Our guests were wonderful. Thank you very much. I think to JD's point, then, I think one thing I'll say now is I've seen a tweet going around the Twitter sphere recently about being kind. Just be kind. When you respond to people, you have the choice. You have the power. You can be kind or you can not be kind. Well, if you choose kindness, you make the world a better place, right? And one situation is if you're talking with someone, if you think they're being stupid or they just don't understand something, think for a second, maybe they interpret it differently. So I'll just leave with the thought, be kind. Let's encourage all sorts of more people to come into our industry. And it looks like there's loads of room, Avril, from what you're saying about industrial IoT. Remember that before 2006, the concept of the iPhone didn't exist, if I got my timing right. Well, maybe 2022 is the year where IoT takes off and thousands or hundreds of thousands of new jobs are created in the technology that didn't exist last year, or the technology existed, but the concept of the job role didn't exist. So let's be kind to each other. I'll tell a story where I wasn't kind once. I was younger and I walked into a room for a job application and guess who was sitting there? It was the guy who I wasn't kind to. And I'm sat there going, well, this interview isn't going to last long. And I learned a very important lesson that day, that you never know when someone that you've been kind or unkind to is going to be in a position of power over you in the future. So I learned a since then we've become good friends. So that's got a happy ending. But be kind to people, because you never know when you walk into a job interview and they sat there as the interviewer, right?
Yeah, very good point. Be kind. All right, and Avril, let's go to you. for your
Yeah,
final
so
thoughts.
I'd like to build on what JD and Phil were saying. And really, I mean, going forward, I think you can't be in a silo anymore. This world we live in is too complicated. It's got too many things going on. And you've got to start collaborating. You've got to get out there. And I'm really thrilled that both Phil and Troy, you reached out and said people can connect to you, because and JD's so vocal on Twitter, and also, you know, as I said, come out and you know, reach out to me on Matter, because it's important. You cannot do it alone. You cannot bring all these pieces. You cannot put the whole system together anymore. It is too vast, and you need to rely on people and network well. So my message would be, use podcasts like this to interconnect with people that you're seeing. Get out, reach out to them, talk to them, take them up on their offer when they say to you, talk to us. Go and talk to them, because you need them down the road in your job if you're going to be working in this space.
Absolutely, great points. It's an industry of, it's who you know and the relationships that you build.
If I can add one point to what Avril said, then I want to emphasize that when you see people doing podcasts, you might think that they are these wonderful people who haven't got any time. What I found in my experience, what Avril said, is if you reach out to these people, they are very welcoming, and they will gladly. They're not going to fix the problem on your Wi-Fi that takes them 4 days free of charge, but they will give you advice, and they will respond to you, and they will engage. And so absolutely reach out. The Twitter sphere, we have a huge wireless community on Twitter. There's Keith with WLPC, the Wireless LAN Association. There are lots of opportunities out there with people that want to help you. So by all means, reach out and engage.
And on that note, thanks everyone for listening to our show today, the Channel 42 podcast. And special thank you to Avril and JD for being our guests on the show. So Avril, CWISE number 6, and JD, CWISE number 5. Thank you again for being our guest. And we hope to have you guys back on the show in the future, because you brought up some really interesting topics that we definitely want to dive into deeper. So on that note, I hope everyone enjoyed the show, and have yourselves a great rest of your days.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.